And so next we have Rob Goldstein, and I know as a country very close to the U.S. what this particular issue has meant to us in Canada. So Radicava, how did the U.S. ALS organizations prepare for FDA ruling and speak with PALS, CALS about approval?
Okay, so I'm going to make an assumption here that a few folks know what Radicava is, but if you don't, here's some background points. There's plenty of people in the room who can tell you more about it. In essence, it's a small molecule, it's right there, which is very helpful, delivered intravenously, basically 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It was developed by a pharmaceutical company a number of years ago, originally approved for a different disease indication, eventually brought into the ALS space, approved in Japan a few years ago. And this year, as Tammy just said, an incredible thing happened that I'm really excited that I got to see as a member of the ALS community, a new drug being approved by our regulator in the United States to treat ALS, Radicava. That approval happened in May 2017, and people in our country started to access that drug from that company in August of 2017, which is a huge deal. And this was something we all celebrated, and then I started to reflect, and I started to ask the question, what happened? How did we, as big green button, organizations talk to our patients and families before the approval? And how do we talk to people afterwards? And I thought that this would be an instructive exercise to go through, as we all know that it's going to take many different treatments to meet the needs of every person diagnosed of ALS-MND. So let's reflect and see what happened this round. How do we do as organizations? What can we start thinking about as those other potential products move forward that we're probably going to have some responsibility to educate patients on? So I'm going to spend a few minutes on that. I want to go into a deeper dive of what we did at ALS TDI, some kind of analysis of insights through our own outreach programs, and then offer kind of a culmination of lessons learned. I do want to mention that this is not just what I saw. One of the things that we have real benefit here through the Alliance is a number of ALS organizations. So I reached out to a few of them, 5 others besides ALS TDI that provided input on this. The ALS Hope Foundation, Hope Loves Company, the Les Turner ALS Foundation, Compassionate Care ALS, and the ALS Association all provided input on this. I cannot give you every piece of information that they provided me. They're in the room, and I'm sure they're happy to talk to you deeper. I'm going to go through each one of their bits quickly. These slides are shared after the meeting, Rachel, online, so everybody can read all these words deeper later on. What I'm going to do is highlight just a unique aspect of each of their outreaches in my conversations with each of them. So the ALS Hope Foundation is a nonprofit, obviously here in the United States, unique in that this nonprofit funds a clinic at Temple University. So the foundation funds that clinic. So they had a unique relationship here with patients. Interestingly, in their outreach, they made the decision not necessarily to talk to their patients in advance of the approval. It was, hey, this thing may get approved, and they waited more so till after the approval to really start to engage with patients. But at their clinic, they were able to uniquely walk patients through how to access the drug, et cetera. Hope Loves Company, you heard from Jody earlier today. They're not related to a clinic, but they have a lot of interactions with patients and families. And talking to Jody, her and her group absolutely did speak to patients and families in advance as they asked questions. Jody and her team, like everybody else I'm going to talk about, went down to Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma America's offices in New Jersey, met with those folks, shared the story about what do they do as an organization, gave their perspective on the ALS community, what people were feeling and asking and thinking. All the groups did that. Interestingly, I wanted to note that Jody, as far as I know, is probably one of the only people in the room who was part of advocacy around Riluzole when our country went through the approval process of that one. So I thought your perspective here was really unique in everybody that I spoke to about this. And that probably fed into how you talk to patients and families. The Les Turner ALS Foundation, similar to ALS Hope, directly connected to a clinic, so they had that ability to have that direct conversation all the way through. What I thought was unique here was, their clinic in Chicago didn't necessarily use all the services that the resource that Mitsubishi Tanabe developed, Searchlight, provided. So they had this kind of interesting situation of having to get information to patients that didn't necessarily fit into this box. So that was a unique challenge that they faced for sure. Compassionate Care ALS, Ron presented last year. They had a lot of conversations with people in advance, and in talking to Ron's team, one of the key things I thought that I heard from him was that they really spent a lot of time in advance talking to people about what Radicava is, or what it could be, and what it isn't and wasn't going to be. And I thought that was really clear in talking to Ron through their communications. And that was a constant theme in everybody that I talked to, and kind of how to walk this fine line of treatment, cure language as we see things newly approved by regulators. And of course, the ALS Association, the largest ALS organization in the United States, did a lot of work in advance with Mitsubishi Tanabe, met with their team quite often, talking about resources that they were going to offer patients, their patient assistance programs, went to the office quite a bit. Post-approval, did a lot of outreach because they reached a lot of different people. Did that very, very quickly. They had Mitsubishi come down and present at their national advocacy conference within days, I think, Colleen, of the approval, which is a really unique opportunity for our community. They held a bunch of different webinars. Mostly what I want to say is I actually thought one of the greatest resources that went out was this awesome website from the ALS Association. There was really clear resources for patients and families. It's one of the better ones that I saw out of the US. So what did we do at ALS TDI? Taking a big step back here and trying to stay on time. We've been talking about Edaravone since the early trials in 2008. I tracked it back on the ALS Forum, all the way through those trials in Japan, et cetera. Started to have deeper conversations as it started to move forward here in the United States. We actually put out the announcement when it was approved in Japan. This was actually cited on Wikipedia, I think, as one of the resources, which was interesting to me. A very highly shared article of that approval in Japan, date set for the approval in the US. And when we heard about the date set, the first people we called at ALS TDI was patients and families, our ambassadors, who I talked to a number of people about at the Cytokinetics meeting and got their input. What did they want to hear from organizations? What did language look like? What frequently asked questions should we focus on, et cetera. Of course, we also traveled down to New Jersey and talked to the company. We started from that moment of being aware that the FDA was considering this to educate our own staff on what Edaravone was and how to talk about it. We had Mitsubishi Tanabe come up to our lab around the American Academy of Neurology meeting and meet our team. We actually attended a joint meeting, I think, of about 10 different ALS organizations up in Boston before or around approval. So did as much outreach that we could as well. And I wanted to throw this up and look at this in the follow-up items. These are the FAQs that not just our organization developed, but most of the others that I mentioned also cited these frequently asked questions as things that they wrote up responses to try to give answers to patients and families and staff around this topic. So then we waited. This thing went out to the FDA. We waited. The FDA actually made its announcement, I think, 10 weeks before they were due to do that. And this amazing thing happened. The FDA approved the first treatment to be marketed for ALS in 20-something years. So this is a big deal in the United States. Immediately afterwards, Mitsubishi Tanabe sent out some really great resources to all the different organizations that they'd been talking to. Here's just a couple of examples of what those look like. And then a lot of online discussion happened. We held a webinar at ALS TDI, 830 about people registered for it, more than 460 attended. Great attentive rate here, meaning that people actually were watching the screen. We have a way to monitor whether or not you do that. Yep, we're always watching. As a marketing guy, we like these insights. Some other really cool things we learned was, did we do a good job communicating? And just two numbers on this screen that I wanted to focus on was we have this ability to measure kind of an unbiased score of messaging. And we, in our messaging at TDI, got 8 out of 10, 80%, and 77% around effectiveness in messaging. And I can dig deeper into what those tools and insights and metrics that we use to come up with that information are. They just give us kind of a starting point on how we kind of did. It's not perfect, it's not 100%, so there's always room to improve. I want to end on just some lessons learned, and these are not just what I thought, these are things that came out of conversations with all of the different folks that participated in providing information to this. We certainly did not see this work perfectly. And that's not a surprise. The first drug being approved to be marketed as a treatment for ALS in the US in 20 years, not going to happen perfectly. I don't think that's an assumption that any of us had. So we certainly know that we need to engage more with the FDA and work on how we can unify our voice in the United States and what that engagement looks like. We need to talk to our patients and families about what the FDA approval process is and isn't, what happens afterwards. I think it came as a surprise to many patients that just because the FDA approved it didn't mean that they go get it at the pharmacy the next day. And we probably as a group of organizations in the United States didn't necessarily talk about that as often and loudly in advance of this. And that probably set some unfair expectations of those that we serve. And I don't think that many of us thought about that. I certainly didn't in advance. Probably need to find a way to work more unified in reaching out to insurance organizations and talking to Colonite and Ron and Andrea in particular. They do a great job at working with insurance organizations locally, such as Mass Health, at the federal level with the VA and CMS, et cetera. So what can we do to kind of walk in with a unified voice instead of asking one organization to bear the brunt of that? So how do we learn and do that better in the future? And I had this crazy idea of, hey, we all hope that new drugs are going to get approved. It's probably going to take more than one. So maybe through this alliance, we can find a way to have a joint task force to kind of sit down and think about what lessons learned so that when the next one comes forward, that maybe we can be walking a little bit closer together. I know that I can't tell any other organization what to do or say exactly, but I think we can do a better job to be more unified in kind of our messaging and providing tools. So I'll stop there and thank you all for listening to me, certainly to the patients and families. I got about 300 different survey responses, did about 50 in-person interviews on this with patients and families. All the different people from the organization's names are up on the board, and my contact information is there. And I know these slides will be online after the meeting, so thank you.
So thanks, Rob, with 4.5 minutes to go. Woo. Let's ask some questions. Okay, Daria.
Hello. Hi, Rob.
Oh, sorry.
Hi. Just wanted to ask, do you have a survey of post-marketing, like what has happened to patients who have taken it?
So I think there's a number of different, so I guess it depends on what type of post-marketing question we want to ask. We certainly do at our organization, and I know a lot of the other organizations do too. We're starting to collect that information, but I would offer, we've only had patients in the US start to access this drug really until September. Yes, it was approved in August, but really access probably didn't start until 30 days maybe after that. So we're only seeing patients accessing this drug for 2 to 3 months. So I wouldn't think it's time to draw too many conclusions on that, but we're collecting the data.
Thank you. Dario?
El tema Edaravone es un tema absolutamente prioritario para el mundo de la ELA.
Well, first of all, thank you, Rob. And we think this issue, the Edaravone issue, should be an absolute priority for the world of ALS.
Después de 22 años se descubre una medicación que podría llegar a ralentizar el proceso de la ELA y que fue aprobado por la FDA.
So it is the first drug after 23 years that was FDA approved to stop the progression of ALS.
Más allá de las diferencias o discrepancias científicas respecto a la efectividad, lo cierto es que la droga está aprobada para gran parte del mundo.
Regardless the different scientific opinions about the effectiveness of the drug, it is approved and it raises a lot of expectations.
En la Argentina tenemos una legislación que ha permitido el ingreso del Edaravone y el cero costo para los pacientes con ELA que empezaron a tratarse con la medicación sin ningún costo para ellos y que fue solventado por los sistemas de salud.
The national health legislation in Argentina allows patients to import the drug for compassionate use at zero cost for the patients because their HMOs or their health systems should cover it.
Y nos encontramos hace un mes con la tremenda sorpresa de que la empresa Mitsubishi Pharma Tanabe ha dejado de exportar el medicamento para estas regiones del mundo y solamente abastece a Japón y a los Estados Unidos.
We were really surprised like one month ago when we got the news that Mitsubishi Tanabe decided to only export the drug to the US and market the drug in Japan, just those two countries and not the rest of the world because there is a lack of supply.
Tuve que viajar de urgencia a Tokio, de donde estuve la semana pasada, para intentar modificar esta situación y espero que en la próxima reunión que tengamos aquí en Mitsubishi, con gente de Mitsubishi Tanabe el jueves, se pueda resolver, porque esto es gravísimo.
Dario traveled to Tokyo 2 weeks ago to talk to the people of Mitsubishi Tanabe in Japan, and we will have some conversations probably tomorrow to try to fix this situation because we had patients that already had the first doses and now they cannot have the second doses because of this situation that is really serious, really severe.
Yeah, I think, sorry.
Termino. Lo que creo conveniente es que si nosotros somos una alianza internacional y estamos frente a una situación de desabastecimiento de la medicación para el tratamiento de nuestros pacientes y que las asociaciones no pueden dar respuesta, necesitamos urgente, en conforme a la misión de la alianza, generar un proyecto o una acción conjunta y corporativa para defender y proteger los derechos de los pacientes a tratarse con Edaravone, frente a los intereses comerciales de Mitsubishi Tanabe.
Well, so our comment is that we think that we as an international alliance of associations should work on this, should make our biggest efforts to try to push forward and to talk to our different governments and to try to change the situation because it's really serious. It's really serious that patients all over the world, except for these two countries, are all of a sudden not allowed to receive the drug.
So, Dario, so you hit on a lot of different things there. What I wanted to try to do with this was at least kind of say that we need to do a job talking about how we talk about newly approved drugs. I want to be clear, I don't work for Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma, and I'm not here to pitch their drug, and I make no claims that that drug is going to work for anybody's in particular disease. I think there's a lot to be learned, but the drug was approved by the FDA, and I think as organizations, we need to figure out how to talk about that. And that's what I hope the conversation that I'm starting today will allow us as an alliance to explore. But I agree with you, man, we should talk about it.
So thank you very much, Rob. And I think there are a lot of questions that we could be asking. But we can follow
I just sorry to disturb you, but just to tell Dario that this medicine is also available in India. It is made by Sun Pharma because the molecule is the same. The names are different, that way names are different. But there are other companies who are making it.
Okay. Thank you.